The crimson skies of Forge World Scaros burned with toxic promise, its horizon broken by cathedral spires and manufacturum stacks that pierced the ruddy clouds like accusatory fingers. Maros Dominor stood motionless upon her observation balcony, 6 auxiliary mechadendrites twitching with calculations as her augmented vision focused on the impact crater 3 kilometers beyond the outer sanctum walls. Something had fallen from the heavens, not with the divine trajectory of an Imperial drop pod, nor with the tainted velocity of Xenos craft. This arrival bore the signature of something else entirely, a breach in reality itself. "Secure the anomaly," she commanded, her voice synthesized through brass vox mitters. "Full containment protocols. The machine god has delivered unto us either revelation or abomination." Itari Rangers converged on the smoking crater with the synchronicity of clockwork, their radium carbines raised in perfect uniformity. Through the drifting ash and debris, something moved within the depression scorched into the ferrocrete plain. A figure struggled to its feet, silhouetted against the sparking remnants of technology unknown. As the ash settled, the figure revealed itself more clearly. Red and gold fragments of armor clung to a human form, some pieces cracked and sparking, others missing entirely. The faceplate was gone, exposing a man with dark hair and a precisely trimmed beard, his eyes wide with disorientation and tactical assessment. "Okay, definitely not Kansas," the man muttered, lifting his partially armored hand, where holographic displays flickered weakly before shorting out. "Friday System Diagnostics." Nothing but static answered him. Thekatari encircled the stranger, their optical augmentics glowing crimson in the haze, their radium carbines hummed with deadly intent. "Hey there," the man said, raising his hand slowly. "Tony Stark, genius, billionaire, philanthropist, though I'm guessing the billionaire part might need recalibration in this, wherever this island." He glanced at the Baroque architecture looming in the distance, the skull-adorned machinery, the red-robed figures approaching with mechadendrites writhing above their shoulders. Let me guess, steampunk convention gone terribly wrong. The Meos domined from her transport accompanied by hulking catapan battle servitors. Her face was a porcelain mask with glowing green optical units where eyes should have been. Only the lower jaw remained human, though it too was inscribed with circuitry patterns inlaid with silver. "You will identify your Forge World of Origin and authorization clearance," she demanded. Mechadendrites unfurling to scan the fragmented armor still clinging to Tony's body. "This technology bears no known machine cult identification. Explanation is required." Tony Stark assessed his situation with the rapid calculation that had kept him alive through countless impossible scenarios. These weren't robots or drones. They were humans heavily modified with cybernetic implants and mechanical appendages. The architecture, the iconography, the weaponry, all spoke of a society with advanced technology, yet implemented with an almost religious reverence. And beyond that, an oppressive sense of age, of decay, masked by ritual. "Look, there's been a misunderstanding," Tony said, wincing as he felt the nanites in his damaged suit struggling to maintain cohesion. "I'm not from around here at all. I need to establish communications with the Avengers compound or SHIELD or literally anyone who doesn't have quite so many extras." He gestured vaguely at the mecha-endrites. Magos Korith's auxiliary limbs suddenly seized one of the armor fragments that had fallen from Tony's shoulder. It sparked in protest the nanites attempting to reconnect to the main armor system. Her optical units widened in what could only be described as mechanical covetousness. "Self-repairing microcircuitry," she intoned, her voice dropping to a reverential whisper. "Autonomous restoration protocols. This is not sanctioned technology." The meshendrite pulled harder at the armor fragment, and Tony winced as the connection, still linked to his nervous system, sent a jolt of pain through his body. "Careful with the merchandise," he warned. "That's still connected." The Margot straightened, her height increased by her mechanical armature. "You claim ownership of this technology. You claim to be its artificer." Tony saw something dangerous flash in those green optical units, a fanaticism he recognized all too well from encounters with zealots of various stripes. He calculated his next words carefully. "I'm its custodian," he said, looking to return it to its proper place. "Incorrect," Korith said flatly. "The proper place for such technology is within the sacred vaults of the Adeptus Mechanicus to be studied and revered. You will surrender all components and accompany us to Interrogation Chamber Delta. There you will provide complete technical specifications of this architect marvel." Tony felt the remnants of his nanotech armor sensing his elevated stress levels, attempting to redistribute itself for maximum protection, despite severely depleted resources. "I've had bad experiences with interrogation chambers," he said, forcing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Rain check." Before the Magos could respond, warning klaxons erupted across the plains. In the distance, explosions blossomed against the crimson sky. Thekatari Rangers instantly pivoted, their attention diverted to this new threat. "Magos Domina," a mechanical voice transmitted. "Herech incursion detected at northern manufacturing perimeter. Alpha-level override protocols initiated." Korith's mechondrites writhed in agitation. Containment breach at this juncture is statistically improbable. She turned to the Catapron battle servitors. "Secure this specimen for transport to the Omnissiah's forge. Priority Alpha." As the brums of the past of massive servitors lumbered forward, Tony made a split-second decision. His armor was damaged, power systems critical, but the repulsor on his right palm flickered with residual energy. He aimed at the ground beneath the lead servitor and fired. The blast threw up a cloud of ferrocrete dust, momentarily blinding the cybernetic troops. Tony sprinted toward the edge of the crater, the surviving components of his armor reconfiguring to support his escape. The jet boot on his left foot sputtered with just enough thrust to propel him over the crater rim. Find cover, assess damage. Regroup, he muttered to himself, an instinctive checklist forged through years of combat situations. He spotted a warren of pipes and conduits leading toward a massive manufacturing complex and ran the sounds of mechanical pursuit echoing behind him. Inside the labyrinthine pipework, steam hissed from ancient joints, and the air thickened with the smell of machine oil and molten metal. Tony pressed his back against a massive coolant pipe, feeling the vibration of whatever massive machinery it fed. He looked down at the remnants of his armor, the nanites struggling to maintain coherence without their central housing unit. "Friday, Emergency Protocol 17, he whispered, hoping against hope. No response came from his disabled AI assistant. He was truly alone in a world that seemed equal parts medieval and post-human. With only fragments of his technology remaining, the sound of metal footsteps grew closer. Tony realized he needed to understand where he was, what he was facing. This wasn't an alien world. These were humans, albeit heavily modified. The language they spoke was recognizable, but the technology, the architecture, the entire ethos seemed twisted into something both advanced and regressive. A sudden movement to his left caused him to turn sharply. A small hunched figure wrapped in ragged red robes scuttled through the shadows, moving with furtive purpose. Not one of the soldier types and lacking the imposing mechadendrites of the leader. The figure paused, electronic eyes blinking as they fixed on Tony. "The fallen Starman," the figure whispered, voice crackling through a crude Vox grill. "The machine speaker with the living metal. She will never let you leave the Forge world alive. Not with what you carry." Tony raised his palm repulsor defensively. "Who's she?" "The walking octopus back there. What is this place?" The figure's hood shifted, revealing a face that was more machine than human. Only a single eye and part of the jaw remaining flesh. Margot's Dominar Korith serves the cult mechanicus with fanatical devotion. Any technology not sanctioned by millennia of tradition is deemed heretical. Your armor moves like it lives. Such abomination would condemn you to the mind scrubbers. Look, I appreciate the exposition, but I need something more tangible. A way out, communications, tools to repair my suit. Tony tapped the damaged arc reactor in his chest, which flickered with unstable energy. The robed figure's mechanical eye worded as it focused on the arc reactor. "The heart of your power. A miniaturized plasma containment device unlike any I have seen." The figure trembled. Whether from fear or excitement, Tony couldn't tell. "I am Lex Mechanic Dren, servant of the Forgotten Archives. I have seen forbidden texts that speak of technology unshackled from dogma. If what you carry is truly what I believe it to be, there are those who would protect you from the Maros Domina." Tony weighed his options. Trust wasn't something he gave easily, especially to strangers in strange lands, but survival required allies, and this talkative cyborg seemed the best option available. Lead the way, Dren, Tony decided, but just so we're clear, I'm not big on being anyone's messiah or specimen. I just want to get my suit operational and find a way home. Dren's mechanical components clicked in what might have been nervous laughter. Home may be further than you imagine. Starman, come. We must reach the underhive before Thekatari deploy their thermal augs. They moved deeper into the maze of pipes and conduits, descending through maintenance shafts and forgotten access tunnels. As they travelled, the grand architecture of the upper forge gave way to neglected infrastructure, ancient and crumbling. Here, among the foundations of the manufactorum, dwelt thousands of human workers, their bodies marked with lesser augmentics, their skin pallid from generations without sunlight. Tony observed these workers with growing comprehension and horror. This was humanity, but altered, diminished, enslaved to machines and rituals they no longer understood. As a weapons manufacturer, he had seen the aftermath of war, but this was different. This was systematic degradation, stretching back so far that none remembered a different way of life. Dren led him to a small chamber hidden behind a full section of wall, accessible only through a maintenance crawl space. Inside, crude workbenches held disassembled machine parts, and tattered technical manuscripts were piled in corners. A single light strip cast everything in harsh illumination. "My sanctuary," Dren explained. "Here, I collect the knowledge the Margos would condemn as heretical innovation, modification without sanction." The Lex mechanic activated a series of switches and hidden security systems hummed to life. "We are temporarily shielded from auger sweeps." Tony immediately began examining the available resources, his mind already calculating repair possibilities. "I need power tools, conductive materials, and anything you have that might serve as a power source," Dren hesitated. The Omnissiah teaches that technology must be approached with reverence and caution. To modify sacred designs is to court heresy. Tony looked up sharply. "Let me ask you something, Dren. Does your Omnissiah want his followers to understand the technology they worship or just blindly venerate it?" The Lex mechanic's remaining organic eye widened. "The greatest servants of the Omnissiah seek to recover the lost knowledge of humanity's golden age. To understand is the highest form of worship. Then help me understand what happened to my technology, and I'll help you understand how it works." Tony held up his damaged gauntlet where nanites still attempted to maintain their form. "This isn't magic, it's science. Advanced, yes, but fundamentally understandable." Dren approached cautiously, mecha endrites extending from beneath his robes to scan the armor fragments. "The power source in your chest. It emits energy patterns similar to Architect from the Dark Age of technology. How does it function without the sacred rites of activation?" Tony suppressed a smile at the earnest question. "No rites, just physics. It's a miniaturized arc reactor, clean energy powered by palladium fusion." He tapped the flickering blue light in his chest. Or it was. Now it's running on fumes, and without it, my armor can't fully function. For the next several hours, Tony worked feverishly to salvage what remained of his suit, using the crude tools Dren provided. The Lex mechanic watched in fascinated horror and admiration as Tony disassembled, rewired, and reconfigured components without a single prayer or incantation. "You speak to the machine spirits directly," Dren whispered. "They obey your commands without the proper bindings." Tony paused, looking up from his work. "No spirits, Dren, just engineering, cause and effect." He hesitated, then asked the question that had been forming since his arrival. "This place, this society, how long has it been this way?" Dren's mechanical components whirred thoughtfully. "The Imperium of Man has stood for 10,000 years, though the Mechanicus traces its lineage to Mars from before the Great Crusade. We maintain the technologies of old, guarding against innovation that once brought humanity to the brink of extinction." 10,000 years. Tony's mind reeled at the implication. Either he had been thrown impossibly far into Earth's future, or this was some parallel reality where humanity had taken a drastically different evolutionary path. And these heretics that attacked during my arrival, who are they? "Servants of the ruinous powers," Dren explained. "Chaos worshippers who corrupt both flesh and machine. They seek to twist the Omnissiah's gifts to their profane purposes." Before Tony could inquire further, alarms blared throughout the underhive. Red emergency lighting bathed the cramped workshop in bloody illumination. "They've bypassed my countermeasures," Dren said, suddenly agitated. "The Margot's Domina must have deployed her specialist hunters." Tony looked down at his partially repaired armor. The nanites had stabilized, but power was minimal, and many systems remained offline. Still, it was better than nothing. "Time to move," he decided, activating what remained of his suit. The nanites crawled across his body, covering him in a patchwork of red and gold armor. His helmet was too damaged to reform completely, leaving his face exposed. Any suggestions for our exit strategy? Dren hurried to a wall panel, removing it to reveal a narrow access shaft. The forge's primary plasma conduits. Dangerous, but the thermal interference will mask our biological signatures. Tony nodded grimly. Lead the way. They crawled through the narrow shaft, the heat growing increasingly intense as they approached the plasma conduits that powered the massive forge. Tony's suit temperature regulation system struggled to compensate, warning indicators flashing across his fragmented HUD. "So these heretics," Tony said as they moved, partly to distract himself from the blistering heat. Would they have any reason to time their attack with my arrival? Dren paused, mechanical eye whirring as it processed the question. The servants of chaos are drawn to disruption in the Immaterium. Your arrival may have created such a disturbance. The Immaterium? Is that some kind of dimensional barrier? Before Dren could answer, the shaft beneath them groaned and suddenly gave way. They tumbled through collapsing metal, falling several meters before crashing onto a wide catwalk suspended above a vast chamber. Tony rolled to his feet instantly, combat reflexes taking over despite his damaged armor. They had fallen into an enormous cathedral-like space, where massive plasma generators thrummed with barely contained energy. Servitors worked mindlessly at control stations, their bodies more machine than human. And standing on a central platform surrounded by Qatari guards was Margot Doina Korith, the Herich collaborator and the anomaly she intoned, her voice carrying easily over the generator's roar. Your capture was mathematically inevitable. Tony positioned himself protectively in front of Dren. "Look, I get that you're curious about my tech. I would be too, but there are better ways to satisfy your curiosity than sending your Terminator squad after me." Korith's mecha endrites undulated in what might have been amusement. "You misunderstand your position, Anomaly. You're not a guest to be negotiated with. You're a discovery to be analysed component by component. Yeah, I'm going to pass on the dissection option." Tony raised his gauntleted hand, the repulsor glowing weakly. "How about instead you help me find a way back where I came from, and in exchange I share some engineering insights? Win-win." The Magos Dominar's optical units narrowed. "Bargaining is irrelevant. Your technology will be catalogued and sanctified regardless of your cooperation." She gestured, and Thekatari raised their weapons. "The flesh is weak, but it can still feel pain. Surrender your armor willingly, and your biological components will be preserved intact." Tony had faced overwhelming odds before, but the cold calculus in the Magos' voice told him she wasn't bluffing. His armor was at minimal power, his most advanced systems offline. Even at full capacity, he wasn't certain he could overcome an entire facility of these cyborg soldiers. Just as Thekatari began to advance, the massive doors at the far end of the chamber blew inward with catastrophic force. Through the smoke and debris poured figures in corrupted, spike-adorned armor, their helmets shaped into leering demonic visages. They fired weapons that spewed unnatural energies, cutting down servitors and Qatari alike. "Chaos Space Marines," Dren whispered in terror. "The Alpha Legion. They have breached the inner forge." Maros Korith's attention instantly shifted to this new threat. "All units, purge the heretic intrusion," she commanded, her own weapon systems powering up with a high-pitched whine. Tony seized the opportunity. "Now's our chance," he told Dren, pulling the Lex mechanic toward a side passage while they're distracted. But before they could reach the exit, a massive armoured figure landed on the catwalk before them, cracking the metal beneath its weight. This warrior stood over 2.5 feet tall, its armour a shifting blue-green that seemed to reflect light at impossible angles. Its helmet bore a stylized Hydra symbol, and its eyes glowed with unnatural intelligence. "The anomaly," the warrior said, its voice a resonant growl that seemed to echo from everywhere at once. "Our lord sensed your arrival through the warp. Your knowledge will serve Chaos well." Tony pushed Dren behind him. "I'm getting really tired of everyone wanting to dismantle me for parts," he said, readying his repulsor despite knowing its diminished power might do little against such massive armor. The Chaos Space Marine laughed, the sound distorted and wrong. "Your technology is but a means to an end. It is your mind that our Lord desires, Iron Man." Tony froze at the use of his moniker. "How do you know that name?" The Marine's helmet tilted slightly. "The warp knows all possibilities, all realities. When you tore through its fabric, every demon and god took notice. You do not belong here, but you may yet serve a purpose." Without warning, the Marine lunged forward with inhuman speed. Tony fired his repulsor at full power, catching the warrior in the chest. The blast slowed the Marine momentarily but failed to penetrate its armor. A massive gauntleted fist swung toward Tony's head. Tony ducked beneath the blow, the tactical systems in his damaged armor providing minimal threat assessment. He needed to end this quickly before his power reserves depleted completely. "Dren, run!" he shouted, engaging his boot thrusters to propel himself into the Marine's midsection. The impact forced the massive warrior back several steps, but did little real damage. The Marine recovered quickly, drawing a pistol that seemed to writhe in its grip. "Your resistance is noted, but futile. You face an artist mortal." Before the Marine could fire, a blast of energy struck it from behind, causing its armor to spark and smoke. Magos Dominicorith advanced along the catwalk, her meshindrites now configured into an array of deadly weapons. "The architect specimen belongs to the Adeptus Mechanicus," she declared, firing another blast that forced the Marine to dodge. "Your corrupt taint will not profane it." Tony found himself caught between two enemies, each determined to claim him and his technology. As the Chaos Space Marine and the Magos engaged in combat, the entire chamber descended into chaos. Fought against the invading Chaos forces, explosions and weapons fire filling the air with destruction. In the confusion, Dren tugged at Tony's arm. "This way," the Lex Mechanic urged. "There is one who might help us, but we must hurry." They fled through side passageways as the battle raged behind them. Tony's armor reported critically low power levels, the nanites struggling to maintain their cohesion. Without a proper recharge, he would soon be left with nothing but inert metal fragments. "Who exactly are we running to?" Tony asked as they descended through maintenance tunnels deeper into the forge complex. "One who remembers the old ways," Dren replied cryptically. "One who still believes in the quest for knowledge, not just its preservation." They reached a massive vault door, its surface etched with thousands of mathematical formulas and circuit diagrams. Dren approached reverently, placing his mechindrites against specific points in the pattern. "Archmagos Riser," Dren called out. "The prophecy manifests. The star-touched innovator has arrived as your calculations predicted." For several long moments, nothing happened. Then, with a series of deep, reverberating clanks, the vault door began to open. Beyond lay a sanctum unlike any other Tony had seen in this strange world. Clean, organized, illuminated by steady white light, rather than the flickering red that dominated elsewhere. The walls were lined with technological marvels, some recognizable, others utterly alien. And at the center, seated upon a throne of gleaming metal, was a figure that seemed more machine than man. Only the smallest portions of an ancient human face remained visible, set within a body that was a masterwork of mechanical engineering. When it spoke, its voice was clear without the static and distortion that characterized other tech priests. "Anthony Edward Stark," the figure said, "son of Howard and Maria, the invincible Iron Man, I have waited a considerable time for your arrival." Tony approached cautiously, his scientific mind racing to process what he was seeing. "You know me. How?" The ancient figure rose from its throne, moving with fluid grace despite its mechanical nature. "I am Archmagos Explorator Riser, once of the expedition fleet Solaris Ignis. For 3,000 years I have calculated the variables, studied the warp anomalies, and prepared for the possibility of your emergence." Tony shook his head in disbelief. "That's impossible. I'm not even from this reality." "Precisely," Riser said. "The multiverse theory, once considered tech heresy by my more dogmatic brethren, has proven correct. You are the variable that my calculations could never fully account for, yet whose arrival I have anticipated." Tony glanced at Dren, who stood in reverent silence. "So, you've been hiding down here for thousands of years, waiting for someone from another universe to pop in for a visit. Forgive me if I find that hard to believe." Riser's mechanical features formed what might have been a smile. "Not you specifically, Stark, but someone like you, a harbinger from a timeline where humanity embraced technology rather than fearing it, where innovation continued instead of stagnation." The Archmagos gestured and a section of the floor opened to reveal a platform rising from below. On it sat components unlike the baroque machinery Tony had seen elsewhere in this world. These were sleek, efficient, unmarred by skull motifs or religious inscriptions. "I have preserved what I could from before the Age of Strife," Riser explained. "Technology unfettered by superstition. With these components, We might restore your armor to functionality. Tony approached the platform, examining the components with a practiced eye. Despite their alien design, he recognized the purpose of many pieces: power regulation systems, energy converters, even what appeared to be a compact particle accelerator. This could work, he admitted. But why help me? What do you get out of this? Rice's ancient eyes, the only human part of him still visible, fixed on Tony with unsettling intensity. The Imperium of Man stands on the precipice of extinction. Stark 10,000 years of technological regression, of treating innovation as heresy, has left humanity vulnerable. The enemies that surround us grow stronger while we merely maintain what little we remember of our former greatness. The Archmagos approached a holithic projector, activating it to display star maps showing conflict zones across what Tony realized must be an entire galaxy. Tyranid hive fleets consume entire systems, Riser continued. The Necrons awaken from their tomb worlds. Chaos corrupts from within, and the Adeptus Mechanicus, once humanity's greatest scientific institution, has devolved into a cargo cult, reciting prayers to machines they no longer understand. Tony recognized the desperation in the Archmagos' voice. He had heard it before, in the voices of those facing extinction, those who saw him and his technology as their last hope. It rarely ended well. "I'm just one man," Tony said quietly. "Even with a fully functional suit, I can't save an entire galaxy." "Not directly," Riser agreed. "But you can be the catalyst. Your understanding of technology is unfettered by our dogma. You could help me awaken the Mechanicus to true understanding once more." The ancient machine man's voice took on an almost wistful quality. "Imagine it, Stark. A new renaissance for humanity spreading across the stars, all beginning with the knowledge you carry." The vision was seductive. Tony had always seen his technology as a means to protect humanity, to elevate it. Here was an entire civilization in desperate need of exactly that. Yet something in Riser's fervor gave him pause. "Let's start small," Tony suggested. "Help me repair my suit and I'll help you understand how it works. After that, we'll see." The Archmagos inclined his head. "A prudent approach. Time is one resource I have in abundance." For the next several hours, Tony worked alongside Risa and Dren, integrating the ancient but advanced components with his damaged armor. The Archmagos' knowledge was vast, though filtered through a strange technological paradigm that Tony struggled to reconcile with his own understanding of physics. "Your arc reactor technology," Riser observed as they worked. "It bears similarities to the plasma containment systems used in our most advanced weapons, yet miniaturized beyond anything we can achieve. The energy density alone would be considered impossible by Mechanicus doctrine. Where I come from, impossible just means no one's figured it out yet," Tony replied, carefully calibrating the power flow from Riser's components to his armor's systems. The nanites responded eagerly to the new energy source, beginning to repair and rebuild themselves. As they worked, distant explosions occasionally rumbled through the forge complex. The battle between the Mechanicus forces and the Chaos invaders continued to rage. "The Alpha Legion will not relent," Dren said nervously. "They are known for their persistence and infiltration capabilities. If they have specifically come for the Starman, they'll find more than they bargained for." Tony finished, watching with satisfaction as his armor's systems came back online one by one. The nanites had insufficient mass to recreate his entire suit, but what remained was now functioning at near optimal levels. Riser monitored the Forge's security systems through direct neural interface. Magos Dominic Kororith has repelled the initial assault, but the Legion has withdrawn into the Underhive. They are regrouping, not retreating. Tony closed the access panel on his newly repaired gauntlet, watching as the nanites sealed the connection seamlessly. "So, we've got killer cyborg priests above and chaos space demons below, not exactly spoiled for escape options." "There is another possibility," Riser said, his tone measured. "My sanctum contains a functioning teleportarium chamber, ancient technology predating the heresy. It could transport you to the orbital shipyards where you might commandeer a vessel." Tony raised an eyebrow. "You're just mentioning this now? Why not teleport out yourself if things get bad?" The Archmagos made a gesture that might have been a shrug. "The technology is unstable, usable perhaps once before, requiring extensive recalibration. I have preserved it for a moment of true necessity." He fixed Tony with his ancient human eyes. That moment may have arrived. Before Tony could respond, the vault's security systems blared in warning. Riser turned to the monitors, his mechanical features tensing in what might have been alarm. "Impossible," he whispered. "They have breached the inner sanctum defences too quickly." The vault door, which had sealed behind them, shuttered under tremendous impact. Something was forcing its way through Riser's formidable defences. Tony activated his armour fully, the nanites flowing to create as much coverage as possible with their limited mass. The helmet formed partially, covering the back and sides of his head, but leaving his face exposed. "Dren, prepare the teleportarium," Riser commanded. "Stark, you must go. What you carry is too valuable to be lost." "I'm not in the habit of running from fights," Tony replied, the repulsors in both gauntlets powering up with their familiar whine. The vault door buckled inward, torn from its hinges by forces beyond normal human strength. Through the breach stepped a Chaos Space Marine larger than the others, his armour a writhing mass of blue-green that seemed to shift and flow like liquid. Where his helmet should have been was instead a face of terrifying beauty, perfect in its proportions yet utterly inhuman. "Alfarius," Risa said, his voice heavy with recognition. "Or perhaps Omen. It matters little which twin you claim to be." The Chaos Lord smiled, the expression too wide, too knowing. "I am Legion," he replied, his voice resonating with unnatural harmonics. "And I have come for the man out of time." Behind the primary figure poured more Alpha Legion Marines, their armour showing the corrupting influence of chaos to varying degrees. They quickly secured the chamber, weapons trained on Tony, Riser, and the trembling Dren. "The anomaly will come with us," Alfarius stated. "Not a request, but a proclamation. His knowledge will help bring the long war to its conclusion." Tony stepped forward, repulsors raised. "I've got a counter-offer. You turn around and leave, and I don't have to redecorate this place with whatever passes for your insides." Alfarius laughed, the sound echoing strangely as though coming from multiple throats simultaneously. "Your defiance is noted, Iron Man, but you failed to understand the totality of your situation." The Chaos Lord gestured and his marines parted to reveal a figure being dragged forward. It was Magos Domina Korith, her mechanical body damaged beyond repair, sparks erupting from severed mecha dendrites. Her ceramic face was cracked, one optical unit dark, the other flickering weakly. "Even now the forge falls to our forces." Alfarius continued, "The knowledge you would share with the Mechanicus will instead serve the primordial truth. A far better use for your genius, I assure you." Tony glanced at Riser, seeing the Archmagos subtly positioning himself between the Chaos forces and a specific console. Understanding dawned the teleportarium controls. "You know what your sales pitch lacks?" Tony said, stepping forward to draw attention. "Incentive. Why would I help you when your fashion sense alone tells me everything I need to know about your judgment?" Alfarius smiled again, the expression becoming more inhuman by the moment. "Because Anthony Stark, we can offer what no one else in this universe can." "A way home," Tony faltered despite himself. "Explain." "The warp is a realm of infinite possibilities," Alfarius said, spreading his arms. "You tore through its fabric to arrive here, leaving a trace, a path that might be followed in reverse. The Mechanicus would study you until nothing remained. We would use your knowledge, yes, but also return you to your reality once our purposes were served." It was a lie. Tony knew it instinctively. Yet the temptation to believe was strong. Home, the Avengers, Pepper, everything he had lost in that moment of catastrophic transport to this nightmare future. "Falsehood," Riser declared suddenly. "The warp offers no paths, only damnation. The ruinous powers seek only to corrupt and destroy." Alfarius turned his too-perfect face toward the Archmagos, the last true believer in the quest for knowledge. "How far you have fallen, hiding in your vault while the Imperium crumbles." His voice hardened. "Your time is ended, Relic. The future belongs to those who embrace change." With blinding speed, the Chaos Lord drew a pistol that writhed and pulsed in his grip, firing a bolt of energy that struck Riser square in the chest. The ancient Archmeos staggered backward, internal systems sparking and failing. Tony reacted instantly, firing both repulsors at Alfarius. The blast struck the Chaos Lord's armour, causing him to stumble momentarily but inflicting no serious damage. The Alpha Legion Marines opened fire in response, forcing Tony to dive behind a bank of ancient machinery. "The teleportarium!" Riser gasped, his mechanical body struggling to contain the damage from Alfarius's weapon. "Activation sequence Delta Theta 9. Hurry." Dren scrambled toward the console, his mechandrites connecting to the interface. Tony provided covering fire, repulsor blasts keeping the Alpha Legion Marines at bay. The chamber descended into chaos as energy weapons discharged, their beams slicing through ancient technology and corrupting the sanctified air with the scent of ozone and burning metal. "I need 10 seconds, Dren called, his voice trembling as data streamed through his augmented consciousness. "You'll get 5, Tony replied, checking his armor's power levels. The reactor was holding steady, but offensive systems were draining energy at an alarming rate. Alfarius advanced through the firefight, seemingly unconcerned by the energy blast impacting his armor. "Your resistance only makes the inevitable more painful," he stated, his voice carrying over the den of battle. "The technology you possess will belong to Chaos one way or another." Tony triggered a small missile launcher that had reconfigured on his shoulder, its targeting systems locking onto the approaching Chaos Lord. The projectile stream, detonating against Alfarius's chest in a blinding flash. When the smoke cleared, the Chaos Lord remained standing, his armor scorched but intact. "Primitive," Alfarius commented, "but admirable in its simplicity." A sudden crackle of energy from the far side of the chamber drew everyone's attention. A circular platform had come to life, surrounded by crackling blue lightning that arced between ancient pylons. The teleportarium was activating. "Now Stark," Reiser commanded, his failing systems pouring their remaining energy into holding back the Alpha Legion forces. "The coordinates are set for orbital Dock 17. Find the Magos Hyperion. He will understand what you represent." Tony hesitated, unwilling to abandon the ancient Archmagos and the loyal Lex Mechanic. "Come with me," he urged. Reiser's damaged form straightened with the last vestiges of dignity. "My function here is not yet complete. The quest for knowledge demands sacrifice." He turned his ancient human eyes to Tony one last time. "Remember what you have seen here, Iron Man. Remember what becomes of humanity when innovation is feared rather than embraced." With a devastating burst of his remaining power, Reiser activated hidden defense systems throughout the chamber. Sentries emerged from concealed compartments, their weapons targeting the Alpha Legion forces with unerring precision. In the confusion, Dren shoved Tony toward the teleportarium platform. "Go," the Lex Mechanic urged. "The Omnissiah guided you here for a purpose." Tony stumbled onto the platform just as Alfarius broke through the defensive barrage. The Chaos Lord's perfect face was twisted with rage as he lunged forward, fingers outstretched to grasp the escaping prize. "You cannot escape the long war," Alfarius snarled. "All paths lead to the same end." The teleportarium activated with a sound like reality tearing. Tony's last view of the sanctum was of Reiser standing defiant before the Chaos Lord, his ancient form silhouetted against the flames of battle. Then the world dissolved into streaking lights, and the sensation of being simultaneously everywhere and nowhere. When reality reasserted itself, Tony found himself sprawled on a metal floor, disoriented and nauseous. The teleportation had been unlike anything he had experienced before, more akin to having his consciousness ripped apart and reassembled than simple physical transport. He pushed himself to his feet, taking in his new surroundings. He stood in a vast docking bay, where massive starships hung suspended in artificial gravity fields. Servatas and tech priests moved among the vessels, performing maintenance rites and loading procedures with mechanical precision. None had yet noticed his arrival on a rarely used teleportarium pad in a shadowed corner of the dock. Tony checked his armor systems. The teleportation had drained significant power, leaving his reserves at less than 30%. The nanites had held their integrity, but without a proper recharge, he would be running on fumes within hours. "Orbital Dock 17, he muttered to himself, recalling Reiser's final words. "Find Magos Hyperion." He moved cautiously through the shadows of the dock, his partially formed armor reconfiguring to minimize its visual profile. The scale of the shipyard was staggering, stretching for kilometers in every direction. Massive Gothic vessels, their hulls adorned with the same religious iconography he had seen in the Forge world below, waited like slumbering leviathans. A sudden commotion from the central docking area caught his attention. Klaxons blared as security forces rushed toward one of the larger landing platforms. Tony moved closer, keeping to the shadows, and observed a ship unlike the others making an unscheduled arrival. Where the Imperial vessels were angular and adorned with skulls and eagles, this craft was sleek and predatory, its hull bearing the same shifting blue-green colours as the Alpha Legion's armour. Chaos vessels have breached orbital defences, a mechanical voice announced over the Vox system. All personnel to battle stations. Enact containment protocols immediately. Tony realized with grim certainty that Alfarius had not been thwarted for long. The Chaos forces had pursued him from the planet's surface, determined to claim the technological prize he represented. So much for the subtle approach, Tony muttered, checking his armor's offensive capabilities. The repulsors were functional, but missile systems were depleted, and the nanites lacked sufficient mass for his more advanced weapons configurations. As battle erupted on the landing platform with dock security forces engaging the disembarking Chaos troops, Tony made his decision. He needed to find this Magos Hyperion quickly, before either the Mechanicus forces or the Alpha Legion could locate him. He accessed a nearby data terminal, his armor's systems interfacing with the unfamiliar technology. The machine spirit residing within the Coitator resisted briefly before Tony's advanced technology bypassed its protective rights. Schematics of the orbital dock appeared on the screen, revealing a command center located near the heart of the facility. Central Command it is, Tony decided, plotting a route through maintenance tunnels and service corridors to avoid the spreading conflict. As he navigated the labyrinthine structure of the orbital dock, Tony witnessed the true scale of the battle unfolding. The Alpha Legion had not come alone. Their initial vessel had been merely a vanguard, a distraction to draw attention, while additional forces teleported directly into key locations throughout the facility. The security forces of the Mechanicus, while numerous and well-armed, seemed caught unprepared for the coordinated precision of the Chaos attack. Tony paused at a junction, hearing the distinctive sound of ceramite boots on metal flooring. A squad of Alpha Legion Marines passed by his hiding place, moving with purpose toward the command center. Their armor, corrupted by their allegiance to Chaos, seemed to shift and writhe even when they stood still, as though something lived within the ceramite plates. The anomaly's energy signature has been detected in this sector, one of the Marines reported, his voice distorted by his helmet vox. Lord Alfarius demands his capture intact. Tony waited until they passed before continuing, moving in the opposite direction. If the command center was compromised, finding Magos Hyperion there would be impossible. He needed another approach. A soft mechanical sound from a nearby maintenance hatch caused Tony to spin. Repulsors raised defensively. The hatch slid open to reveal a tech priest, more human than most Tony had seen, with only his eyes and right arm replaced by augmentics. "Iron Man," the tech priest whispered. "I am Artificer Thule, servant of Magos Hyperion. The Archmagos foresaw your arrival and sent me to guide you." Tony kept his repulsors aimed at the tech priest. Convenient timing. "How do I know you're not working with either the Chaos Marines or the Meos' Dominus forces?" Thule extended his mechanical hand, revealing a small device bearing the same mathematical formulas Tony had seen etched into Riser's vault door. The Archmagos shared his calculations only with those he trusted implicitly. Magos Hyperion was his most devoted student before the schism forced them apart. Tony hesitated, then lowered his weapons. "Lead the way, but know that I'm watching every move. One sign of betrayal, and you'll learn exactly what my armor can do, even at reduced power." The Artificer nodded solemnly. The Omnissiah's will be done. They moved through hidden passageways that bypassed the main corridors of the orbital dock. As they travelled, Thu explained in hushed tones, "Magos Hyperion leads a faction within the Mechanicus known as the Innovators. Like Archmagos Riser, he believes that true worship of the Omnissiah requires understanding, not merely preservation. For this, he has been declared borderline heretical by the more conservative factions. So I've stumbled into a religious civil war," Tony observed, "with killer robots on one side and demons on the other. Fantastic." "The Adeptus Mechanicus is not merely a religious order," Thule corrected. "We are the technological foundation upon which the entire Imperium stands. Without us, humanity would have fallen millennia ago to the Xenos threats that surround us." They reached a sealed bulkhead, unmarked and seemingly abandoned. Thule placed his augmentic hand against a hidden panel, and the massive door slid open with surprising silence. Beyond lay a laboratory, unlike anything Tony had seen on this Forge world. Clean, ordered, with technology that seemed less encumbered by religious iconography and more focused on function. At the center of the laboratory stood a tall figure in pristine white robes. Unlike many of the tech priests Tony had encountered, this one retained much of his human appearance. though his eyes glowed with the same green luminescence that seemed common among the higher-ranking Mechanicus adepts. "Anthony Edward Stark," the figure said, his voice cultured and precise. "I am Magos Biologus Hyperion. Your arrival has been foretold in the calculations of Archmagos Riser, though I confess the timing could have been more auspicious." Tony stepped forward, his partial helmet retracting fully to reveal his face. "Seems like everyone around here knew I was coming except me. Care to explain how that's possible?" Hyperion gestured to a holothic display where mathematical formulas of staggering complexity rotated in 3 dimensions. "The warp is not merely a medium of transport in this universe, Mr. Stark. It is a realm of infinite possibilities where time and reality are fluid concepts. Riser's calculations predicted a nexus point, a moment when the barriers between realities would thin enough for a traveller to pass through. What he could not predict was who that traveller would be." The Magos approached a sealed chamber at the far end of the laboratory, but when his monitoring systems detected your arrival, bearing technology that defies our understanding of the physical laws, he knew his calculations had been correct. The chamber opened to reveal something that made Tony freeze in shock. Suspended in a stasis field was a fragment of armor, red and gold, bearing the unmistakable design of his own Iron Man suit. "This is impossible," Tony whispered, approaching the fragment. "That's mine. But I've never been here before." Indeed, Hyperion confirmed this fragment was discovered in the ruins of a Xenos world designated Faith and 9 in a stratum dating back approximately 15,000 years. It bears your unique energy signature, yet shows evidence of design elements that even your current armor does not possess. Tony's mind raced with implications. "You're saying this is from my future, that I've been here before or will be? The warp makes mockery of linear time, Mr. Stark." Hyperion said, "What you see may be from a future that will never come to pass or from one that is inevitable. The calculations suggest multiple possibilities." A distant explosion rocked the laboratory, causing instruments to rattle on their shelves. Thule rushed to a monitoring station. "The Alpha Legion has breached the primary security cordons," he reported. "They are systematically searching each sector. It is only a matter of time before they locate us." Hyperion's expression remained calm. "Then we must accelerate our timetable." He turned to Tony. "Mr. Stark, I believe I understand how you came to be here, and potentially how you might return to your own reality." Tony glanced at the seed fragment of his future armor, then back to Hyperion. "I'm listening. Your arc reactor technology creates a unique energy signature that resonates with certain frequencies in the warp. When subjected to extreme stress or specific electromagnetic conditions, it can create what we would call a warp rift, a temporary passage between realities. So, my reactor accidentally punched a hole between universes," Tony summarized. "That explains how I got here. How do I get back?" Hyperion gestured to a device occupying the center of his laboratory. Unlike the Baroque machinery common to the Mechanicus, this was elegant in its simplicity. A series of concentric rings surrounding a central platform. This is a warp harmonic amplifier based on Riser's theoretical work. It has never been tested as we lacked a suitable energy source with the correct resonant frequency. The Magos fixed Tony with his glowing green gaze. "Your arc reactor possesses exactly the frequency required." Tony understood immediately. "You want to use my reactor to power your device, hoping it will open a portal back to my reality." "Indeed, but there is significant risk. The power requirements would drain your reactor completely. If the calculations are incorrect, you would be stranded here without power." Another explosion closer this time emphasized the urgency of their situation. Alarms blared throughout the orbital dock. "And if I stay," Tony said grimly, "I become either a research specimen for your Mechanicus or a trophy for these Chaos Marines. Neither option appeals to me." "There is a third possibility," Hyperion said quietly. "You could join us, the Innovators. With your knowledge, unfettered by our millennia of technological regression, you could help spark a new age of understanding. The Imperium stands at the brink of destruction, Mr. Stark. Your genius might be the catalyst that saves humanity from extinction." It was a seductive offer, appealing to the core of who Tony Stark was. A man who built things, who solved problems, who protected humanity through his creations. Here was an entire galaxy of humans in desperate need of exactly that protection. Before Tony could respond, the laboratory's primary door exploded inward. Through the smoke and debris strode Alfarius, his armor now fully corrupted by chaos energies, writhing with symbols that hurt the eye to look upon. Behind him came his Alpha Legion warriors, their bolters trained on the laboratory's occupants. "The choice is made for you, Iron Man," Alfarius declared. "Your knowledge belongs to the primordial truth now." Tony activated his armor fully, the nanites flowing to cover as much of his body as their limited mass allowed. "I've never been good at following other people's scripts," he replied, repulsors charging. Hyperion and his tech priests moved with surprising speed, activating defense systems hidden throughout the laboratory. Servata gun platforms descended from ceiling compartments, targeting the Chaos Marines with high-energy weapons. The Alpha Legion responded with disciplined fury, their bolters firing mass-reactive shells that detonated with devastating effect within the confined space. The laboratory became a maelstrom of weapons fire, shrapnel, and destruction. Tony engaged Alfarius directly, knowing the Chaos Lord was the primary threat. His repulsors fired at maximum power, striking the corrupted armor with blasts that would have vaporized normal materials. Alfarius staggered but did not fall, laughing as the energy washed over him. "Your technology is impressive," the Chaos Lord acknowledged, "but it is nothing compared to the gifts of the warp." Alfarius raised his hand, and reality seemed to buckle around his fingers. The air between them rippled with unnatural energies, and Tony felt his armor systems fluctuating wildly as though subjected to electromagnetic interference. "The gods have granted me dominion over machines," Alfarius explained, his perfect face split by an inhuman grin. "Your armor answers to me now." Tony felt the nanites in his suit begin to respond to an outside influence, their programmed behaviors corrupted by the Chaos Lord's sorcery. He fought for control, his mind racing through emergency protocols and system overrides. "Sorry to disappoint," Tony gritted out, "but my tech doesn't play well with others." With a supreme effort of will, Tony activated a fail-safe he had built into his armor's operating system. After encounters with technopaths in his own universe, a controlled electromagnetic pulse rippled through the nanites, temporarily disrupting all functions, but also severing the Chaos Lord's influence. The armor went dark for a critical second before rebooting, its functions restored to Tony's control but at a cost. Power reserves dropped precipitously, the arc reactor struggling to maintain essential systems. Across the laboratory, Hyperion worked frantically at the controls of his warp harmonic amplifier, the device beginning to hum with increasing power as its rings rotated faster. "Stark," the Magos called out. "The device is ready, but requires connection to your arc reactor to complete the sequence." Tony dodged a blow from Alfarius that would have crushed his skull. The Chaos Lord's strength enhanced by both his post-human physiology and warp energies. He fired his boot thrusters, propelling himself away from his opponent and toward the amplifier. Working on it, Tony shouted back, landing beside the device. His armor's systems automatically began interfacing with the unfamiliar technology, searching for compatible connection points. Alfarius roared in frustration, his voice no longer remotely human. "You will not escape," the Chaos Lord gestured, and reality rippled again, this time more violently. The laboratory's far wall simply vanished, revealing the void of space beyond the orbital dock structure. Only emergency force fields prevented immediate decompression. The remaining Alpha Legion Marines converged on the amplifier platform, determined to prevent Tony's escape. Hyperion and his tech priests fought desperately to hold them back, their mechadendrites transformed into weapons of surprising lethality. "The connection is established," Tony's armor systems reported. "Warning, power drain will reach critical levels in 30 seconds. The amplifier's rings began to spin more rapidly, energy building between them to form a swirling vortex of blue-white light. Unlike the corrupted energies wielded by Alfarius, this portal seemed clean, precise, a surgical cut in reality rather than a ragged tear. "It's working," Hyperion called out, his voice barely audible over the rising whine of the machine. The calculations were correct. Alfarius, seeing his prize about to escape, charged forward with inhuman speed. The Chaos Lord tore through the defending tech priests, his corrupted power armor lending him strength that even the cybernetically enhanced servants of the Mechanicus could not match. Tony stood at the threshold of the portal, the swirling energies calling to him with the promise of home. But as he watched Alfarius cut down Hyperion's loyal followers, something hardened in his resolve. This was a pattern he had seen too often in his own universe, running from the fight, leaving others to face the consequences. "Hyperion!" he shouted. "Can this device be overloaded?" The Magos looked up from where he frantically worked to maintain the portal's stability. Theoretically, yes, but the resulting warp breach would be catastrophic. Tony nodded grimly. That's what I was hoping. With swift precision, Tony interfaced directly with the amplifier's control systems. His armor's AI, limited though it was by damage, quickly identified the key regulatory algorithms maintaining the portal's stability. With a few targeted commands, he bypassed these safeguards, allowing the energy build-up to increase exponentially. Warning, his armor announced. Catastrophic overload imminent. Recommend immediate evacuation. Alfarius sensed the change in the energy patterns and hesitated in his advance. The perfect face frowned, perhaps the first genuine emotion Tony had seen from the Chaos Lord. "What have you done?" Alfarius demanded. "Change the game," Tony replied. He turned to Hyperion. "Get your people out. This place is about to become very unstable." The Magos' eyes widened in understanding. "You're sacrificing your way home. I'm making sure these Chaos fanboys don't get their hands on technology they can't handle," Tony corrected. "The multiverse has enough problems without adding corrupted Iron Man armor to the mix." Hyperion nodded solemnly, then barked orders to his remaining tech priests. They began a fighting retreat toward the laboratory's secondary exit, carrying what critical data and equipment they could salvage. Tony faced Alfarius across the increasingly unstable portal. The amplifier's rings were now spinning so rapidly they were barely visible, the energy between them fluctuating wildly in hue and intensity. "You doom yourself for nothing," Alfarius said, his voice once again calm and reasonable. "The long war will continue with or without your contribution. Chaos is eternal." "Maybe so," Tony acknowledged, "but today it doesn't get my armor." The Chaos Lord laughed, the sound echoing strangely as though coming from multiple throats. "You think this is about your crude technology? The primordial truth seeks minds, Iron Man. Brilliant minds that can be turned to its purposes. Your armor is merely a shell. It is your genius that would have served chaos." The revelation struck Tony with chilling clarity. Not his technology, but his intellect, his creativity, his ability to innovate. In a universe where such qualities had been systematically suppressed for millennia, his unfettered genius represented something truly dangerous. The amplifier reached critical levels, the portal expanding beyond its intended parameters. Reality itself began to buckle around the laboratory, gravity fluctuating wildly. Equipment tore free from moorings, flying toward the portal before vanishing into its depths. Alfarius stood his ground, seemingly unconcerned by the imminent catastrophe. "This changes nothing. If you die here, your essence joins the warp where the gods may claim it still. If you flee back to your reality, the path remains open for others to follow." Tony's armor reported critical power levels, the arc reactor straining to maintain basic functions while simultaneously feeding the overloading amplifier. He had perhaps seconds before complete system failure. "I don't plan on dying," Tony replied, "and I don't plan on running." With his remaining power, Tony fired his repulsors at the stasis field, containing the fragment of his future armor. The field collapsed, and the fragment fell free. In the fluctuating gravity, it drifted toward the unstable portal. "What I plan," Tony continued, "is to create a paradox understanding dawned in Alfarius's inhuman eyes. The fragment, if it returns to your timeline, then it never ends up here 15,000 years ago," Tony finished. "The calculations that predicted my arrival never happen because the evidence that inspired them never exists. The loop breaks. The fragment passed into the portal, vanishing in a flash of blue-white energy. The effect was immediate and catastrophic. The portal's energies surged uncontrollably, reality itself seeming to protest the paradox forced upon it." Alfarius lunged forward in a last desperate attempt to reach Tony, but it was too late. The portal expanded in a blinding flash, engulfing both the Iron Avenger and the Chaos Lord in its light. The last thing Tony saw was Alfarius's perfect face, contorted in a scream of rage and disbelief. Then, nothing but light, and the sensation of falling through infinite layers of reality. Tony Stark awoke with a gasp, finding himself on the floor of his laboratory in Avengers Tower. Diagnostic equipment surrounded him, screens displaying the results of experiments on his latest armor prototype. Friday's voice came through the speakers, tinged with what sounded almost like relief. "Welcome back, boss. You've been unconscious for approximately 17 seconds following the power surge in the dimensional phase analyzer." Tony sat up slowly. his mind flooded with images of a dystopian future where humanity worshipped technology it no longer understood, of cyborg priests and corrupted space marines, of a galaxy teetering on the edge of extinction. Friday, did the sensors record anything unusual during the surge? Nothing significant, boss. Standard electromagnetic discharge, minor take-on fluctuations, all within expected parameters for the experiment. Tony looked down at his hands, half expecting to see the nanites of his damaged armor, nothing but his own skin, unmarked by the ordeal he remembered so vividly. Had it all been a hallucination? Some strange dream during those 17 seconds of unconsciousness? As he stood, something caught his eye on the workbench. A small fragment of metal, red and gold. Its composition unlike any alloy currently used in his armor designs. He picked it up, turning it over in his fingers. Its molecular structure seemed to shift subtly as he watched, as though struggling to maintain its coherence in this reality. Friday, scan this fragment. Full atomic analysis. The AI complied, scanners humming as they passed over the mysterious object. Analysis complete, boss. Results inconclusive. The object appears to contain elements not currently on the periodic table. Its atomic structure is demonstrating quantum instability, consistent with theoretical models of transdimensional matter. Tony stared at the fragment, a chill running down his spine as he recognized it. Not from his current armor, nor any he had yet built, but identical to the fragment he had seen suspended in Hyperion's laboratory, recovered from a world 15,000 years in his supposed future. The paradox didn't fully resolve, he murmured. A trace remains. Boss, Friday inquired, should I continue the dimensional phase analyzer experiments as scheduled? Tony closed his fist around the fragment, feeling its subtle warmth against his palm. In his mind flashed images of skull-adorned machinery, of knowledge hoarded and feared rather than shared and expanded, of humanity reduced to worshipping what it once understood. No, Friday, shut it down. There are some doors better left closed. He placed the fragment in a secure containment unit, locking it away from curious eyes, and pull up a new project file. Title it Omnisire Protocol. New project created boss parameters. Tony gazed at the sealed containment unit, his expression solemn insurance against a future where we forget how our own creations work. He turned away, already formulating plans for a comprehensive knowledge repository that would survive whatever catastrophes the future might hold. Behind him, for just a moment, the fragment in its containment unit pulsed with an energy signature identical to that of his arc reactor. Then it stabilized, a silent reminder of a timeline that might yet come to pass. In the vast emptiness between realities, something watched with patient interest. The paradox had been elegant, the loop apparently closed, but in the multiverse nothing was ever truly lost. Paths once opened could be found again by those with the knowledge to seek them. And knowledge, like the fragment itself, had a curious way of surviving against all odds.